I feel I'm right when I say that we rarely get lore on the Men of Stone and the Dark Age era ships that they flew around in, or the AI that they are linked to. But I have found one parked around a Daemon World. It shows us how close the pilot and the AI were in the Dark Age, at least in this one example, and how much control the pilot had of the weapons and fighters within the ship that he journeyed around in. The ship is called the Slaughtersong, and its pilot Vec. First the 101, so you see how this matches the Men of Stone lore. During the Dark Age of technology, the Men of Gold made the Men of Stone, who created many more miracles using their AI, I believe, minds on Terra. The Men of Stone were then sent out into the galaxy with companions. AI at first, Men of Iron, I believe, and later humans. Why were they sent out? For resources and to expand the territory of the Men of Gold. That's the basic scraps of lore behind it. Now let's get the interesting stuff. The pilot arrives at the ship, and the AI, who we will just call Slaughtersong, says, "I was beginning to think that the probability of you ever returning was very low." Vec says he hopes it wasn't lonely, and it says, "I have been able to amuse myself." The planet provides much of interest. So that little exchange there tells us the very human core of the AI and how the advanced time of the Dark Age of technology was when applied to the Men of Stone. It missed him, but passed the time, perhaps distracting itself by taking a little peek at the Demon World. And Vec shows his own concern for it. So they are clearly closely bonded companions. This is echoed as a short moment by another Men of Stone ship, the Spirit of Eternity, which gets lost in the warp and comes out in the 40k era, where its pilot is, in short order, horribly killed, in such a way that it turns the AI against anything else it meets in the 40k galaxy, finding this era so wicked. So there are close bonds between humans and the AI ships they ride on. Now, later in the novel, which is Daemon World, world bearers nip onto this ship. Once on board, there is another short exchange between the pilot and the AI. "Ready?" The lights of the Slaughtersong flickered in reply. "Good," said Vec. "Open the armoury and prepare. And now, if you've been here for a while, you know how much I love weapons and technology from the Dark Age and alien places." So listen to this, it's pretty cool. Here, when Vec faces the word bearers, he calls on his sword like Lion-O and his Sword of Omens. It flies to him. Now before we get into the sword and its abilities, this shows there's some sort of mental link via technology, I would assume, between the Men of Stone AI and its pilot. He can summon this with a thought. It also shows the trust they have. It was as if the intervening millennia had never happened. Vec and the Slaughtersong are so attuned to one another that Vec had hardly to think before his commands were answered. From deep within the ship, a bolt of silvery light shot from the armoury doors straight into Vec's hand. It had one more fight to win. The blade was heavy and familiar. With a flick of a wrist, he cut the wordbearer's gun cleanly in two. The sword itself was honed from the heart of a star and white hot to all but Vec himself. Perhaps some physical enhancements or just a general immunity built into the sword, since that'd be pretty smart to do that. The Starheart blade had no respect for even the most ancient of power armour. The Space Marine never even had a chance to register Vec's presence before the sword had passed down the centre of his helmet and through the armour's collar, splitting the chestplate and abdomen and carving through the groin itself. Cleanly bisected, the awful stank of entrails rolled out as the Space Marine's body fell in two in a welter of blood. And if this was an anime, the dude at this point would do a slow-mo walk-away with some cool rock music in the background. And remember, this is still a human from that time facing armoured Astartes. We see him trade saw blows with them physically and be able to keep up. That and his long life show some physical enhancements. But what about the Dark Age technology armour? Like the sword, Vec calls on it, and the plates of armour shot through the air from the depths of the Slaughtersong to slam around his body. And if you remember that old cartoon, at this moment in my head, I hear, "Power Extreme." The armour was made from a sea creature from the Demon World below, and sadly it is not Dark Age armour, which would be cool. As the first Blows are struck and the fight continues. Vec finds himself in the hold of the ship, which has a lot of fighters. Huge chromed raptors with delta-swept wings and bundles of particle projectors jutting from the fuselage. There were 70 of these craft lined up ready in the hold, lit by the stark floodlights high up on the ceiling, waiting to be launched at the will of the ship's master, just as they had waited since they had flown against the last enemy. So this, as with the Spirit of Eternity, indicates there was more of a crew than just the one Vec. Each was crewed with more than one to the pilot. At this point, Vec asks for fighter control, and the AI says, "Of course, my lord," in a metallic voice, directly into Vec's inner ear. And suddenly the cockpit instrumentation lit up on 70 ships. He uses this command to move a ship and reveal two hidden, and I'd like to think, slightly quivering and carrying word bearers. He brings his hand down and slams the ship down where the word bearers had been. And here we see his physical command of the ships, how it moves when he moves his body. He then commands a dozen fighters to help deal with the word bearers and the invasion of this craft. But what about the Men of Stone technology itself? How does it look? How does it feel? What's it capable of? As we mentioned, the ship was watching the Daemon World through many sensor arrays, which it can transmit to flat screens on its bridge. The bridge of the Slaughtersong was a pretty thing, a shining armoured sphere several hundred metres across, in which hovered circular platforms lit brightly from within. Instrumentation appeared as ghostly lines of light in the air, traced out by hidden hollow projectors, and scanners fed through to broad flat screens that hung everywhere and followed at a command. Inside the ship was bright and clean, very well hoovered, with lumo strips picking out the polished chrome surfaces, every curved wall smooth and embellished. The floor was of bright silver mesh and the walls of mirror-bright metal. The Slaughtersong was so old it looked new. Now back to the AI. The machine spirit of the Slaughtersong was perhaps even older than the rest of the ship. Vec had found the ship towards the beginning of his career in the Maelstrom, and even then he knew it was something pretty special, that it was a relic of the dark age of technology. There was little doubt, and the machine spirit was the strongest evidence. The core was like an arena, ringed by towering grey-black memory stacks, as tall as buildings, each with a faint ripple of light playing across the surface. The wide circular arena of dark glassy stone was full of wispy lights, forming complex shapes and swirling patterns that broke up and reformed at the speed of the Slaughtersong's thoughts. The ship was all but sentient, a companion as much as a vessel, a counsellor and sounding board, as well as a weapon. It sounds very human. I would like to add here that Vec, as mentioned, is not the original pilot, but I think we can still use his relationship as a gauge to look at the bond between Men of Stone ships and their companions. We see with the AI ship, the Spirit of Eternity, again a similar bond. That ship says, "He was taken, my bondmate, my friend." So now we have shed some light on that dark age of technology and enlightened you with forbidden knowledge. I'll wrap up the video. Let me know what you think to this law. Have I applied it directly? I'm up for being corrected. Just do it nicely. Have you heard about the Slaughtersong from the novel Daemon World? I found it a rough read, but I enjoyed these lore tidbits. It made it worth it. Drop a comment down below, guys. Let's talk.